Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast exploring storytelling on film, as well as interviews with industry professionals who work in film, television, theater, among other areas of the arts. I want to welcome to the show Ryan Cassidy. He is the youngest son of Shirley Jones and Jack Cassidy, followed in the footsteps of his three famous brothers, David, Sean, and Patrick, embarking on an acting career. He appeared on The Facts of Life, but soon became much more interested in working behind the camera. He worked in the art department for Jim Henson Productions as set dresser on Muppets Tonight, later working on The King of Queens, Summerland, According to Jim, ER, Southland, and The Lincoln Lawyer. He currently works on NCIS. Ryan also sits on the board of directors for the Los Angeles Police Museum, and we're talking about this wonderful book that he wrote with Johnny Ray Miller that just came out recently, which I loved. James Cagney Was My Babysitter. Ryan, welcome. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I love the book. It's so good. And I actually read it again this morning, and I watered up my eyes. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful and touching. But before I have some questions about the book, but before we jump in, I just wanted to, it's interesting because, of course, as I said, you're Shirley Jones and Jack Cassidy's son, and most people, of course, know your mother from the Partridge Family, but I was born in 87, so growing up in the 90s, we watched Drew Carey, and that's the first thing I saw your mother in was her as Drew Carey's girlfriend, which I loved.
I watched her when she was shooting that.
Oh, really?
The audience, yeah, at Warner Brothers.
Oh, that was great. That's what I remember her from. But when you when we set this up, I wanted to watch more of her early work, and of course her Oscar-winning performance in Elmer Gantry, which I've been meaning to see for a while because I love Lancaster. And what a movie! And she's brilliant in it. It's such a good film. Wow.
Lulu Baines.
Yeah.
And it was a book that was written in the 1920s.
Right.
So of course she'd already made Oklahoma and Karis, and Richard Brooks, who directed Elmer Gantry, wasn't sold on my mother playing. I
read that.
And Burt Lancaster went and fought for her.
Well, thank God, because she's so good in it, and that film really holds up well today. Even it's so modern, and it feels it's so universal. And I was just blown away by the performances. Your mother in particular. I'm less familiar with your father, but I was listening to you in another podcast, and you mentioned this film he did, W.C. Fields and Me, where he plays John Barrymore. I was like, I gotta see that. That looks like a really good movie.
It was the last movie he made, and he looked a lot like John Barrymore. So he was a perfect. It was a perfect cast. He carried himself a lot like John Barrymore, really, in reality. And so it was just, I remember being with him on location, not far from where I live here, and it was at a house that was supposed to be W.C. Fields' house. It was in San Marino. And it was an amazing time watching him shoot that, or, the scenes that he did that day were amazing. I went to go see Christopher Plummer do the one-man show, Barrymore.
I saw that too, yeah.
And he mentioned my dad, and he said he watched my dad and loved my dad's performance. Yeah, my dad was, I thought my dad was good in everything he did, but I'm biased. He was great. Valerie Perrine was in that movie. Rod Steiger.
Yeah, it's got a great cast. John Marley.
Right. Who else was in that movie? It was great.
Hiller is fantastic filmmaker, and I must admit, and I love the 70s films too. It's my favorite decade. And I was like, how do I not know this? Because it looks so good. So I'll be getting to it.
Billy Barty was in that movie too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I have a picture of my dad and Billy Barty at an event, and it's a fantastic image of them. And yeah, he was in that movie. There's a lot of great actors in that movie.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it soon for sure. So one thing that you said in the book at the back was that you were thinking about doing this for over 20 years, this book. What was it about this story that you wanted to share?
Well, I didn't know how I was going to, what the platform I was going to use to share it on. I didn't know. I just knew that it was a really sweet, endearing afternoon spent with him. And when I was putting it together, I had to, I was 7 years old, so I had to really fit it all together and bring back all my memories from that day, where they could build a bridge for a story, whether it be a children's story or whether it be autobiographical. I didn't know how to do a short story for a magazine. I didn't know how it was going to end up. So I had met Johnny Ray Miller, and he'd already written a book about the Partridge Family. And when I was telling him about this story, I said, Johnny, I really have this interest in book, and I don't know how to do it. So he said, well, what's the book about? I said, well, it's a story of the actor's name's Cagney. When I was a little boy, I had spent several hours at his house, and I have a drawing in my house that he gave me of a character, and I've stared at this drawing.
There it is, for anyone who wants to see it.
And that book, and this is the actual one.
There we go. Yeah.
So when I would look at the drawing, I would think about Cagney, and through the years, since I'm 57 now, it was 50 years ago, I saw his movies and I got to see the incredible talent the man has. So what stayed with me that really was kind of that just was never left was his humility, his wisdom, his intuition, and his artistic endeavors that he was able to share in other areas, whether it be his artistry, his vision, his connection to animals. He had this way about him that was polar opposite of being a gangster actor and all, and the tough guy roles that he played. So through the years, I was thinking to myself, I would see these movies, I'm like, I don't remember him being that guy. Right. He was an incredibly warm and wonderful elderly man. He was in his 70s at the time, and made me feel very important in his own way. I mean, I had interests from what things and images that I saw in his home, and I was studying the settings of these that looked like sort of miniature, like fairy tale settings that were built inside of a display cabinet inside of his wall.
Right.
And it turned out to be, one was called Pirates Cove, and the other one turned out to be Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. But told to you visually through these characters that were made, rather than reading the story, you're seeing it inside of a wall as miniatures. And that's really what I saw. And I learned that afterwards from a magazine that came out in 1939 called Screenland. It was about his home, and his home was new in 1939, the one that I went to. So I learned that afterwards. But when I saw them, I remember them being like, I was like Disneyland or something. It was like, what am I seeing here? You know, I'm on a, it was just amazing. These little characters.
Right.
So he asked me why I was so fascinated with, I think it was one of the Seven Dwarfs. And I said, I just think it's amazing that you have this. And, you know, I wouldn't expect an older man to have these, you know, have models, if you will, built into their wall in their living room.
Right.
So he took an interest to that, and he said, well, I'm going to take out a pad, Ryan, and I'm going to draw for you. What would you like me to draw? He says, I like to paint. I like to draw. So he ended up drawing. I said, I like leprechauns. I'm fascinated with leprechauns, and they bring good luck. And my dad and I have this little connection with Irish, you know, we're Irish. And so he said, well, I'm going to draw something for you. And that's what he ended up drawing for me, which was the dancing man from the forest, as I interpreted it. My interpretation of it later was that. I actually think it was really himself, a sort of a version of himself from
I could see
Yankee,
that.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was so creative and so interesting, and was a great storyteller, and very comfortable within himself. You know, you could just, he was okay with everything. And I think another aspect of his personality that really was intriguing to me, even as a 7-year-old child, was he was so, he didn't talk about him, his accomplishments, who he was. It wasn't about him.
Right.
It was about sharing an experience with a 7-year-old boy that wasn't his own son or grandson or relative. It was, you know, Shirley and Jack's little boy. Did a movie with my
right.
and
Never steal anything small. 1959, right? So yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And this, sorry, go ahead.
I left with this, you know, this drawing, and kept on thinking to myself, I've seen all these James Cagney movies through the years, and I remember it was that afternoon stayed with me, and the connection that I had with him, and I thought, I really want to share that story at some point. Because through the years, people would ask me, you know, if all the people I've met in show business, and I've met a lot of people in show business, and actors and singers and everybody, but he was the one that really stuck out.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
And so this experience left such a lasting impression on you. So outside of it just being this incredible afternoon, what was it that you felt was important to share? I mean, you know, it's obviously it's a children's book. This exploring, you know, what he gave to you in terms of using your imagination and not just seeing one thing, but one thing is not just one thing. There's something more to everything in life.
He's a multi-dimensional guy.
Right.
I think the book, the message that I have wanted to convey is that sometimes we perceive these actors or public figures that are in the entertainment, you know, world as being who we think they are, who we want them to be. And sometimes characters that we don't like until we actually meet them and see that they're not any of that.
Right.
And he is that. He created that story for me of somebody that, and the irony is, it wasn't until later in life that I really saw many of the roles that he played, that I went back and I thought, my God, but that's not my memory of him. Wasn't that guy or that guy or that guy.
Right.
But I could see that he could easily have done that based on his creativity,
right,
his connection to a child, again, that wasn't his own, I just recently, I'm in touch with his grandson, Jonathan, and nice man. And he has a copy of the book. And we talked about it. And he said he didn't really remember his grandfather taking care of him, or, at least didn't have this experience that I had. And I didn't know how to respond to say, it's funny because I don't remember my grandfather taking care of me. So, sometimes the experience that a child has can have a different effect on another child than it does that person. So, but I was very touched by the fact that he ordered the book and took an interest in it and thanked me for it. My goal is to bring actors like James Cagney into this generation, and to allow, whether it be this generation or even a different generation, to keep these people alive,
right,
through not just through their movies running, but to show them in a light that can be represented to a younger audience, and they now know, wow, that's really cool. And that's also part of my objective here with this book, was to, my brother, when I first started out on this journey, my older brother said, Ryan, kids aren't going to know who James Cagney is. He was absolutely right. The book has a wonderful story, whether you know James Cagney or you don't.
Yeah, that's true.
But once you read it, and you can read it in 15 or 20 minutes, you then know, I want to know more about this guy, James Cagney.
Yeah.
And that's another aspect of it.
Yeah. And I like that at the end, then you didn't talk about who he was. I mean, obviously at the beginning, you say a little bit that he was this movie star, but then at the end, there's this great chapter on, how big and great he actually was. This element of the imagination really is really interesting to me, and I'm curious why do you how can imagination benefit children throughout their lives, do you think?
I think it can benefit children because they can grow from their own experience that they may have kept a secret, and look at it and say, that's something that I want to go back and, look at again, and maybe my drawing is something worthwhile, and maybe my story is worthwhile, and maybe, I can write my own little book about the experience that I had, that is important to me, that maybe can send a message to somebody else. Or maybe I have the ability to, I didn't give myself a lot of credit as a child with creativity. I knew that I wasn't in touch with my creative side until, or at least I didn't accept it until I was older in life. And I think the aspect of wanting to get this book done and send a message, and also to have other kids be able to draw from it, is to say that they may have forgotten about an experience that they had when they were younger,
right,
and as a child, that was meaningful, and that they can apply to something now in their life, or that they can explore. I think that I don't think enough children have. I don't think they have enough places to be able to do creative work, and to blossom in that way. I don't know how to explain it, except to say that I wasn't very good in school in things like math and science, but I I found a lot of my self-esteem through the years in what I actually ended up doing in my life, which was visually and looking at something and saying, that's really exciting to me. How can I make that work for me where maybe I can earn a living at it? And so I may have had that as a child, had the ability to do that, but I didn't know it until later. And so I feel that whether you're a child or you're an adult or you're in between, I think that we don't give ourselves enough credit for the things that we have experienced in life that really were something we may have not looked at as being something that we were good at or that we could apply and share with somebody else that was creative in the arts and on any level with the arts. So I'm not sure if that made any sense or not, but
yeah, certainly, because what I took from it is this connection with your imagination and your creativity, because when you're obviously, kids are innocent and they can play and they can have fun and they can use their imagination, and when they grow up, it starts to be taught that, oh well, that's silly, put it away, those kind of. And so people, but we still have those feelings, and people put it into, let's say sports. You see people celebrating over sports, and even though they're not going to get anything out of their team winning, I'm not putting it down, but that is that same childlike creativity. So so I think, it doesn't even, for what I took so much from the book, is that it doesn't even have to be that you're going to want to be an actor or a writer or a director, but just being connected to, nature and people and your environment, and stimulating your emotion. There's so much that can benefit people, how much they could then empathize with others, see more in others. That's what I took from it. I don't know if that was something that resonated with you, but
yeah, the journey of making the book and sharing the story through the illustrations was constantly in line with my relationship and what my daughter was telling me. And I'm a father to a 12-year-old girl, and my daughter is really creative, and she's an amazing artist. She's got an amazing voice at 12 years old. I don't know where she got the singing voice from, but and she's just a multi-talent. I'm saying that sarcastically. She obviously was. She's got a genetic thing going on that's already there. That's creative, and the talent is there. And so she was a big part of me finishing this book,
right?
Because I gone to her initially and I said, Megan, I want you to help me with these illustrations. It's like I wanted her to almost create a storyboard to start off to see how it would actually happen. And she helped me with that. And so we cut to the book gets finished, and she's, 12 years old, and I see what she does and how involved she is with her art and her school, and she's in a theater program at school. And it's just was so stimulating for me, because I'm thinking to myself, I'm creating this book, went completely out of my box of anything that I would normally do. I don't work in front of the camera anymore. I work behind the camera. And when the book was made and the story was done, and I followed, every morning I'd wake up, I'd see a new illustration. It was so incredibly rewarding and uplifting for me. And I would go back to her and I'd thank her for it. I'd say, Megan, look at this. I can't wait to share this with you. It was just a really great experience. And so I think that, we have, whether I dedicated the book to the child in all of us, right?
Right.
I think that that child in us that is creative, or that was creative, maybe because they decided that now adult, walked away from whatever they thought was something that they could do, is always there. And
yeah, exactly.
You need to go back to it, and you need to explore it. Whether you're
Right.
50, 40, 70, go back to it, explore it. And that child in you that was maybe very involved in some aspect of art when you were younger is still there waiting. And you now, as an adult, can create something. And if that's the message that you got from reading the book, then I did something good.
You did well. There we go. No, that's certainly what I took away from it. And something else I wanted to ask you just about storytelling in general. How do you think one can teach children to listen to the importance and value of a good story, would you say?
I think I would first ask that child or children a happy time in their life that was meaningful to them, and then have them write it out. And when they write it out, as they're writing it, they may find that they want to keep adding to it, and they elaborate on it, and then they can't put their pen down, and they go, wow, look what I just did here. And that then is read to the student next to them, and they don't know what those stories are, and they get to share it with each other. Mm-hmm. I think that's a great way to teach us that we all have a great story if we want to write it and share it.
Right.
Meaningful to us. And whether it be my day at the park, or my day with grandpa, or my day with at Disneyland, or my day meeting Santa Claus, whatever it may be.
Right.
Let's write it down. What was your feeling like? How did that make you feel? And the emotions that it created for you as a child. Write it out, and then show it to your partner, and have them give you their story, and see where that goes. Find that there's a lot of great things there.
I like that. Yeah. Because I feel like if it's something personal to them that they're sharing, they may be more likely to then listen to something that is being communicated to them, whether on stage or in a film or show. I like that. That's great advice.
And you don't want to judge somebody and say, that's not very, enlightening story. No. Like when I first was thinking about James Cagney Was My Babysitter, there was a part of me that kind of like, it's not a really interesting story. It's not. Nobody cares. Nobody knows who James Cagney is. It's 2023. It doesn't mean, or whatever. And look what I did.
Right. Yeah.
So, and whether the book sells 1 million copies or it sells 10 copies, it wasn't about that. It wasn't about making money. I was a labor of love. And it was a message that I wanted to carry to other people about just exactly what we're discussing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this connection he had with nature fascinates me. You see in the book, he tells you he loves to talk to the animals. He's talking to the imaginary owl outside the tree. I love that. He has you say hello to the owl.
Right.
Is a connection with nature important to you, do you think? And why may that be important to instill in someone, if you think it's important, that is?
Well, he loved Morgan horses. That's what he collected. And he was somewhat of an environmentalist. I think nature is very important, particularly in this climate, because we live in so many different climates, and we live around so many different kinds of animals that are maybe whether they're indigenous or not to that area. So nature is a big part in our lives on a daily basis. And nature was something that he was connected to and wanted to share it with me, because he did, and I didn't forget it. And I grew up with animals. My mother wanted to be a veterinarian before she was an actress, so animals were a big part of my life. I love nature. I love all different aspects of nature. You stop and let's look at these beautiful poppies or flowers, and
Right.
you know, let's figure out whether, you know, this came from somewhere, and let's enjoy it and appreciate it. And that's the message that I believe that he really wanted to protect the environment. And I believe that he, you know, had this incredible love for animals. And he lived in upstate New York, as you know, and
yeah,
he would finish a movie in at Warner Brothers or wherever, and he'd go to his farm.
This meeting wasn't in that farm though, or when you met him, or was that in LA?
It wasn't at Verney Farms. It was, he lived in a house on Hillcrest, and then he moved to a house off of Coldwater Canyon, Hillcrest being Beverly Hills. Then he moved to a house off Coldwater Canyon and Cherokee, which is in Beverly Hills still, but it's further up in the hills. It's off of a well-known street called Coldwater Canyon. And you couldn't see the house from the street. It was a gate with a long driveway, and you couldn't see. All you could see is the closed gate, and that's where this took place.
Okay.
The house that's in the magazine that I described to you in the 1939 issue of Screenland.
Oh, really?
He just bought the house in 1939.
Oh,
him and his wife. And
oh, wow. Fantastic.
Yeah.
You got it. Wow.
So it's and in fact, if you can see this, that's the house.
Oh my God.
That's the house.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And it talks about Pirates Cove and the setting of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in it. And it wasn't until I found this magazine through the help of Dana DiCarlo.
Oh, really?
And my connection with our conversations about Cagney and about these little settings that I'd seen that day in his wall, that I realized that what I was looking at wasn't so much a leprechaun as it was one of the dwarfs in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So
I love that. I particularly like when he had you look at the rocks and how you're like, all I see is a rock, but he's like, no, I see a person. I see the vice president of the United States, Gerald Ford, at the time, and this is the 70s, of course. And what I love so much about that is we can look at, I mean, you can look at anything and of course see something more than what's obvious about it. But even if someone is, let's say, smiling, maybe they're trying to look happy, but what's going on in the eyes? You know, a smile is not necessarily just a smile. So I like that we just all need to look a little deeper, which was something, that's what I took from that. You know, I just thought, wow, the fact that he was instilling that in you, whether he was conscious of it or not, it's hard to say. Or if that, you know.
It was part of his charm and part of his creative process, his creative thinking. Was that he saw something beyond what was right in front of him.
Exactly, yeah.
And he wanted to share that with a young boy.
Right.
I would never in a million years would have looked at one of the rocks or stones near his fireplace above his hearth and thought, that's our vice president, Gerald Ford.
I love that. Well, I think that's why he was such a good actor as well. You know, he played so many different parts, but then he played, you know, a number of gangsters who on the surface seem similar, yet he always saw something else in it or modeled it on someone else he knew that then just made this character so different. And so for me, when I watch Angels with Dirty Faces, I'm not even thinking Public Enemy, or vice versa, because he just played them. And it's not like Daniel Day-Lewis where he's transforming himself inside and out. It's subtle, but there's always something that he brought to it that was so human. Because again, he could use things that he could see wonderfully. Do you have any favorite Cagney movies? Do you have a top 3 or top 5?
Funny enough, one of my favorite Cagney movies is Man of a Thousand Faces.
I still have to see that. I have not seen that. I got to get to that one.
I mean, White Heat.
Yeah.
There. Yeah, I mean, my favorite Cagney movie is Yankee Doodle Dandy.
Oh,
but
yeah.
the reason why I love Man of a Thousand Faces is that I'm fascinated with Lon Chaney and his life, and I don't know, there was a very wonderful story in that film, and so I loved it. And then there was a lot of things about Lon Chaney's life that I wasn't aware of, and he just did a beautiful job with that movie. He was great.
Yeah, I still got to see that.
Yeah, he was versatile. That's for sure.
Certainly.
I mean, frankly, more than any actor that I love there's a lot of great actors that I love. One of probably the most versatile actors, though, is James Cagney.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. Yeah. It's astounding every time I go back to them. It's really is something.
The irony is that he really wanted to be a song and dance man, and Warner Brothers kept putting him in gangster movies.
Yeah. So. Yeah. He luckily did crack through it, though. Whereas especially then, that would have been very difficult to have not played what they wanted you to play. It's pretty. He's a tough guy in that sense.
He was under contract. It was during the Depression, and it was just they were just spitting him out. One movie after another movie after another movie.
Yeah.
Work crazy hours. That's what he did. His paycheck, as you said.
Yeah.
In interviews, he's asked, well, you're just such an incredible, iconic actor, and look, what's your favorite role? And you're just everybody's favorite. What did you think of it all? His reply was, just a job.
Yeah, I love that. I love the modesty.
It's so modest.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of lessons to learn in that, even in his interviews.
1,000%.
Today, people go on and on and on. I mean, there is something to be said about being open, which perhaps can be good, but there is also something to be said about not being, too showy about or pretentious about anything.
Yeah, he wasn't that at all.
No, not at all.
I mean, Pat O'Brien was probably one of his closest friends, and there's another incredible actor and fantastic human being from the interviews I've seen him in. There's one that him and Cagney are in together, and it's like these two brothers. They're not brothers, but they were so close, and they did movies together. And when O'Brien is talking about Cagney, he looks to him and he touches his hand, and he starts to get choked up. They had such a connection together.
Yeah, their chemistry was fantastic.
A big smile on his face and taking it all in,
Yeah, definitely. I just want to give a shout out to your illustrator here, Andrea Carvajal. I hope I have that right, because I love the.
And Carvajal is her name, and she is one talented lady.
Absolutely. I just want to show There we go. Yeah. Just pick my mic up here just to show people a little bit of what some of these wonderful, sorry, I can't even see that because of the camera, but they're so well done. Every image is so striking. I absolutely love it. It's a fantastic job. Well done, everyone involved. Where's the best place for people to get the book? I imagine it's pretty much available
you can buy it
anywhere online.
Yeah, you can buy it through Amazon. You can buy it through Barnes and Noble. There's many distributors out there that you can buy it through now.
Great.
So, and I hope that they'll be carrying them in stores, in the stores themselves. You know, it's a
That'd
process, the journey.
Yeah,
I do believe that it will land in the stores. I think it's in the air right now.
Yeah.
You know, making its way, creating, you know, getting its own life, and I'm very, very proud of it. And I hope that everybody takes the chance to buy it, because initially people thought, well, you know, people said, well, I'm not buying a kid's book. And I've had people tell me, but I don't see it as a kid's book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great sign,
it's for everybody, really.
For everybody.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the stories that I want to share about my experience in making the book was that the template that I had in my mind for this book was the book, The Giving Tree. You know the book, The Giving Tree?
It sounds familiar.
So the Giving Tree is a story about a little boy who grows up, and he becomes very close to a tree. His best friend is this tree, right? He takes the apples as a little boy, and he cuts the branches and builds a home. And at the end of the book, he's an old man sitting on the stub of the tree because he's already cut the tree down. And he says to the tree, I'm an old man now, I have nothing left. And the tree says, well, here, come sit on my, you know, on the area that he had cut. It's basically a story about a relationship, about a little boy that kept taking from this tree, and the tree loved him unconditionally and kept giving back to him and wanted to give to him. And so I used that book as a template, not so much because of the story. It's a very different story. What I wanted to create was a story that was simple, that every time you'd see a page, you'd see an illustration and you'd see some text.
Yeah.
And a simple story that had a message at the end of it. And I believe that's what this has. It might even have one.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, no, it certainly comes through. And I really hope it does get in the bookstores, because it's a book that when they're browsing, can find, because it's different when you're an adult. You kind of know what you have in mind, you know, now with the internet, but kids are not equipped to think of, I'm going to go order such and such. It's through going to the library. It's through being exposed to, you know, bookstores, right? There's a whole kids section. So this would be great to pop out on a bookstore, to be discovered, I think. And the covers, so just show it again. It pops, the colors, everything. It's just so wonderful.
It's kind of our publishers wanted to make a wow book, like wow, you know, that's a great, and it has that feel. My brother gave me a really sweet compliment. My brother Patrick said to me when he got the book, I sent him a copy, and he said, you know, Ryan, I got to tell you that if I didn't know you weren't my brother, I would want to pick up this book and read it. And coming from him, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Coming from both my brothers, to, you know, been so supportive of it. Patrick's part of the story. The incident that happened with Cagney and the rock, Patrick was there as well. He'd come back. He's not in the story, but he was part of the day. He came later on with my dad when they came back to get me. Patrick was with me. And so Patrick remembers that as well. But I just gave my perspective on it. And but very complimentary about the book, as was Sean. And my mother just loves it.
Oh, yeah, the great forward from and afterward From Shirley
Shirley
Jones
Jones.
herself. Yeah. Fantastic.
Just turned 89 on March 31st.
Yeah, I saw that on your Facebook page. That's fantastic. That's great. Some great pictures that you shared.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
Ryan,
so
sorry, go ahead. You had another thought?
No, I'm just thank you for having me, Robert.
No, my pleasure. Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on, and best of luck with the book. And again, for those of you watching, the book is called James Cagney Was My Babysitter. So highly recommend it. Not only if you're a Cagney fan or a classic Hollywood fan, but just a book fan in general, or if you got kids, there's something for everyone in it. So check it out. So Ryan, thanks again.
Thank you, Robert. Appreciate it. And you can read the book in under 20 minutes, and it's got illustrations. I hope everybody takes a chance and buys it. I think they won't regret it. So
fantastic. Well, I hope we can have you back on again sometime and talk about a Cagney film or something else.
You got it. Be an honor to come back. Thank you.
I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon and receiving exclusive content, go to patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. And if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo. You will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left in just a second. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new videos. Also, please comment below. Let me know what you think of King Kong from 1933. Click the like button as well, and I will see you in the next episode.